So thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. And I have one goal tonight, and that is to reimagine this thing that we call networking. Because truthfully, I hate networking. When anyone says we're going to have a networking event, I think, oh, literally rolling my eyes out loud. Because when it comes to networking, what do you think? Let's have a discussion about this. I don't want to assume too much. So just start telling me, what do you think when I ask the question, what is networking? Why do we do it? Anyone?
I think a lot of times we have this idea of just like, oh, I'm just meeting people to get ahead type of thing.
To find a job? Yeah, so it's good to know people. Hopefully people who are hiring eventually, right? What else? What is networking? Why do we do it?
I feel like networking is in large part used for business.
For what purpose?
Like to connect businesses together and get them to work together.
Exactly. Has anyone been to an event where you do the business card shuffle? Here, have my business card, I'll take yours. And where do those business cards go? I have a whole desk drawer full of business cards that I'll never look at again. It's really fun. There was a hand over here. Hi.
Just because networking is to like build relationships and connections with people, but it can often have a negative connotation of like using people or trying to get ahead in a negative way.
Exactly. Really, it is the word and the connotation of the word. And that's why it's not networking that is bad, it's the connotation of the word, and that's what I want to reimagine tonight. And the reason I'm here is because I mentor 6 amazing women, and when I presented them, we had our second meeting, they asked me, can you tell me about networking? And instead of giving them some really traditional invitation about networking, instead I showed them a blueprint that I've used, that I created when I was just starting out. I was still in college because I wanted to avoid networking. So I created my own blueprint because I knew that I did have to basically do what networking is about, but I didn't want to do it in the way that I saw it because, one, it looked really awful. Anyone agree? I don't know, maybe some of you are just extreme extroverts and you think networking is fun. I get to meet people, I get to talk to people. I'm an introvert. I don't necessarily get jazzed about that. But for that reason, networking is something that I decided to reimagine from the very start. Now, what are some of the pain points you've experienced with networking?
Did you say pain points?
Pain points.
Yeah, I never know what to say.
It's a little awkward.
Yeah, I feel like my name's Belinda Ham. I'm the director of CAL.
Yeah, I'm really awesome.
What do you say?
Yeah. Let me tell you how I'm awesome. Hopefully you'll remember. Moving on to the next person. What else? What else have you guys experienced that you find is painful?
I think just because of the negative connotation, it kind of feels like insincere.
Totally.
Like that people are almost expecting me to be insincere and do it in kind of the traditional way, and that you're never really sure if people really care about building a relationship with you.
Right. Yeah, so I work in communications, but I also work in marketing, and let me tell you, this is always true. Everyone is looking to buy something, whether it's a product, a belief, an idea, but no one wants to be sold. So when you're coming at them, you're trying to sell them on you, right? And it feels really weird. And it really, the minute you start to do that, a wall goes up of resistance. And if that's happened to you, you feel that wall. You're like, what is happening? Why do I want to shut off and not talk to this person? It's because of that reason, correct? So, pain points being that when it comes to networking, what we're actually wanting to do and what we're actually looking for is connection. I know one thing to be true. When I started out in my career, before I graduated, I was in college, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had an idea of some things that I wanted to achieve, but I didn't know what I wanted to be in terms of forever. And I'm gonna bust a myth right now. I still don't know. I still have never gotten to that point where I know what I want to be where I grow up. I think of thought leaders like Seth Godin, who describes his life as a series of projects. So it's constantly evolving. And I want you to think about your career and what maybe you aspire to in that way, unless you know for certainty that you want to be a doctor. you kind of have to commit early if you want to be a doctor, right? Just the amount of education it takes and everything after that. You can't get through that and be like, never mind, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Well, or a lawyer or something like that. But what I knew for certain, I knew one thing, is that I wanted options. I wanted to know that when it came down to a position out there, a project, a promotion, any opportunity, that I was going to be a contender. That's all I cared about. So I went about creating kind of a blueprint for myself that meant I was going to be connecting with people in a way that I would keep myself top of mind for them. And that's the missing link. When we talk about networking in this like people shuffle, we're not remaining top of mind for anyone that we've met at a networking event. And so moving forward, do you really think that you're going to be a contender when the next position comes open? Or the project that you really want to run point on or be participating in? Or a promotion? So that's what I want. Anyone on board for creating something like that for yourself, having a few options, perfect. We're on the same page. So Paul J. Meyer said, communication, the human connection, is the key to personal and career success. And it's really as simple as that. So the blueprint I'm going to share with you tonight is for connecting with anyone. And when Colton reached out to me and asked, can you tell me what the title of your presentation is? I didn't have one. And the first thing that came to mind was connecting with Oprah. And then I thought maybe I would just oversell what I was going to present to you tonight. But I'm telling you that this blueprint can be used to connect with anyone. Oprah may take a few years, but you can do it. I was able to do this connecting with some of my favorite people and some people that I really found aspirational to me. And I've been able to do it through every iteration of my career, from starting out in broadcast to now in digital marketing. So, blueprint, this is a 3-step process. It's super, super simple. I'm going to share examples from my career right now, but what I hope is that you see the opportunity to use where you're at, where you're starting at, and kind of work this whole framework into your working model. Step 1, find people and their contact information. This part is easy. You probably have the start of a contact list. So local chambers, professional associations, meetup groups, Eventbrite, alumni associations, professors. Does anyone not have contact with someone that looks like this list? No one? Okay. I'm assuming that you have professors that you could reach out to. Now, what I would move forward and add to your list as key individuals within companies that you want to work for, or key individuals working on projects that you love. I would also add thought leaders that you love, that you aspire to be like, people with a tribe, people who when they speak it resonates. So this is your starter contact list. Now let me break this down and give you an example. In my field of marketing, I'm always looking for journalists who are willing to write about my clients or the products that I'm looking to promote. So an example of how typically marketers go and find these journalists, because journalists always have a beat, so their topic of choice. They might go to Mashable. Is anyone familiar with Mashable? Yeah. You can go into Mashable. It's just a conglomerate of really timely news. And you can go under the topic of business. Oh, there's an article that I really like. And boom, here's the start of the article, and here's the author. So step number 1, find people. Found one. And what you can do is click on her profile, and you can find her Twitter handle and her LinkedIn information. And that's one way to start gathering people's contact. But let me tell you, this is going to take you way too long. So can I give you a hack to start gleaning this really, really fast? Does that work? Yeah. Here's your hack. Is anyone familiar with power searches? Okay, I love this. In marketing, we're really good at hacks when it comes to the interwebs. We know how to get a lot of data really, really fast. This is probably the simplest hack I can give you. So a power search is you pull up a browser, Google would be Google Chrome here, and you type in site, the URL that you're looking to basically scan and glean information from, a space, and then the keyword. And this will all come clear in just a couple of minutes, but this is called a power search. You can do this in any variation out there. But this is basically, instead of going into a website and trying to use their search function, which isn't very robust, and some websites purposely de-index things, so internally you can't pull them up, like authors' bios, because they don't want those to show up before articles. This is the way to hack that, to just bypass it completely. So what shows up before you even go into the website in the search engine's results page, see, I'm scrolling, I see that the first few rankings aren't really helpful, but boom, by spot 5, I see that Danielle, she's an author for Mashable, and I had plugged in SI Newhouse, and if you guys listen to my bio, you know that I graduated from the Newhouse School of Communications, and it says in her bio that she is a recent graduate of SI Newhouse. The next one is Joe Kaplan. If you were able to just continually scroll, you would see I was pulling in a number of authors that write for Mashable, and they happen to also be associated with the same school that I graduated from. So that was one way that I quickly gathered, and then I repeat. I repeat with a new publication. I might go to Forbes, I might go to Fortune, I might go to the Daily Herald, I might go to uvu.edu, and I'm able to pull in immediately everyone that has this connection point based on this simple keyword, being a university. Does that make sense? Is there any part of that that's confusing? It's just a simple hack. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into this gather. When you gather, I prefer to gather the site name, Mashable, and I put that in a column, the URL, not of just the website, but the URL of the profile of the author. So then I can quickly go back to that in future reference. The name of the person, the title of the person. I want to know their email if that's provided. It's okay if it's not, because there's other tools to reverse engineer that. Their social media handles, and then any notes. Notes being, this person writes about business specifically. This person is a graduate of the Newhouse School. Kind of things, why I would be interested in them moving forward. And then I dump everything into a spreadsheet. And there's nothing sexy about this spreadsheet other than I freeze frame the top row. There are no formulas to this, but this is something I've been working with for the last 15 years. And I keep growing it and I keep working on it. So this is my contact list. It's as simple as that. So this is how you find people really, really quick to start building your kind of Rolodex of people. Now you can repeat this, and when I mean repeat it, I kind of suggested it, but basically it's go back and use this power search to plug in any media publication. But in your cases, it's probably any company that you want to work for. And you could take the route of first seeing, well, does anyone at the company have a bio that suggests that they also graduated from UVU? But you'll start to see as you start doing this, you get to create your own spin on this. You can plug in keywords that are specific to topics that are related to what you're interested in. When you start looking for people, you're not necessarily looking like so specifically for a university. You might look at it. I have a marketer who's really into bird watching. He's like, this community of bird watchers, it's robust, and they are like dyed in the wool. So it's a great way. At this step, you could take just step number 1. You could start reaching out to people, and you would have a motive to reach out to them, and you would have a touch point. And I would say this isn't like a warm lead, but this is like between cold and warm. And that's way better than your current situation, right? Where you're feeling like the whole world is a cold lead. I just want in. So this is one way to do it really, really fast. So using this method, I was able, just for this same example, I found Adam at Mashable. I found Seth at Forbes. He's a contributor. I found Abram, who's the deputy chief of reporters at Forbes. He literally oversees all the reporters for Forbes. So if I reach out to him and say, hey, Abram, we graduated from Newhouse. Would you mind putting me in touch with whoever is on the beat of social media? I have a story for them. It's a warm lead for me, right? Way better than going into an employee directory and just trying to scan all the information. So build your contact list, go back to this, and start breaking it out. Find ways to infiltrate, to figure out how you can make connections and find contacts in unique ways. I would add to this in a second. So that is basically how you find people. Step number 1 is covered. Step number 2 is connect. Not with them, not yet. I want you to first connect the dots. This is where we take this blueprint and we actually start to give it legs. So, every single person that you have in your contact list, I want you to ask 2 questions. Number 1, who are they connected to? And number 2, who am I connected to? Is anyone familiar with the 7 degrees of separation? It's like Kevin Bacon. We're all connected to Kevin Bacon within 7 degrees or less. And I have found this to be true with everyone I've ever tried to reach out to. So back in 2013, I started a podcast because 1, I wanted to learn what new media was, podcasting being new media, and podcasting isn't what it is now. People were starting to launch podcasts. Most of them were really, really bad. There were a few gems in there. But I wanted to figure it out, but I also wanted to test this theory and see if I could connect with my ultimate wish list, the person that I wanted to interview. And that person was Tim Ferriss. He's the author of The 4-Hour Work Week, 4-Hour Body. I just think he's a brilliant mind. And so in 90 days, I did over 100 podcasts. And it took me 3 months, only 3 months, if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, to connect with Tim Ferriss. And along the way, I connected with so many other really, really cool people. And what happened was it was really slow moving at the start. I reached out to people I knew locally, people who I knew if I reached out and said, hey, would you do this interview with me? They'd say yes. They were like obligated to because, we were friends or something. And from there, it just was like an avalanche. And by the time I reached him, I was almost ill-prepared to have a conversation with him. So I had my wish list going into it. I wanted to test the theory. You guys can do the same thing. If you want to talk to the CEO of the company that you aspire to work for, you can get there. You might have to start with the HR manager within that company. But don't you think you could walk into the HR manager and then eventually someone's going to connect you to the ultimate person? So always ask this question. So let's go back to this example. I found Adam, I found Seth, I found Abram. Now for one particular thing I was doing, this campaign that I was running, again, this is back in 2013, and it's when Foursquare was a thing. And Dennis Crowley, I just happened upon his bio in some of my searches, and boom, he's also a graduate of the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. So what I did was I asked, well, who am I connected to? And who is he connected to? And sometimes you just start with who are you connected to, but I was able to kind of work with both questions at the same time. And I went back to my contact list and I was like, well, I'm connected to professors at Newhouse. And I reached out to them and asked them, does anyone know Dennis? As in, had a conversation with Dennis in the last couple years as Foursquare has grown. And sure enough, they said yes. And he is actually an active member of our alumni association. Let me introduce you by email. Simple enough. The degrees of separation was all of 2 people to get in touch with Dennis on that one by just asking those questions. So I would say go back to your contact list, keep asking that question. If you run out of options in your mind, then you're trying to make it overly complicated. You have to just keep adding movement. With the podcast that I started, all I cared about was forward movement. I didn't care about getting to Tim Ferriss with any time frame. I just wanted movement, which creates momentum. Make sense? Do you guys see how you could find people and then actually connect with them with the contacts or the lack of contacts that you have now? Any of this not clear? I'm accepting questions right now. No? No? Okay, just giggles? Okay. So other things that I would add to this contact list at this point is look at job boards. Job boards are great for finding out about positions, but also finding the hiring manager, and then how you're connected to the hiring manager. So if you walk into a job interview and you're able to name drop, like, oh yeah, I'm also connected to so-and-so, that is going to be that much more powerful, correct? Look at recruiters. They're notorious for being connectors. And I have a lot of recruiters. They're also called headhunters, and they're always blowing up my phone. But that wasn't the case when I first started out. So you can reach out to them and you can say, I noticed that you recruit for these types of position in this industry. They may not be able to tell you the companies that they do that for, but you can say, would you mind introducing me to so-and-so? And we get into the third step. This is all going to come together for you. But recruiters, you may not be able to provide them a ton in terms of placing you somewhere, because usually they work at like the director and above level, but they do have a contact list, and if you appeal to their vanity, they're definitely going to be willing to connect you with someone. Award sites. So award sites are really great in that they organize everything really nicely for you. They organize it by category, and within those awards, they tell you the company that's won a certain award, and then they usually tell you the PR manager or the HR manager or sometimes the CEO and the best contact for that. So if ever you're wondering, how do I get into a company like Apple? See what kind of awards that go back to your power search and see what kind of awards that they've won recently. And when they submit for those awards, there's always a name attached somewhere. The last one would be speaker panels. So event summits are great for gathering around industries. And what they do is they bring in the thought leaders within that industry. So instead of trying to figure out, from Facebook or from just general search, who is really notable in a specific industry, try to find an event, a conference, a summit, and then go to their speaker panel. Who are they inviting to speak at their events? That might be someone that you aspire to make contact with. And I'll have a little bonus tip at the end to help you with that even more. So, going back, we're gonna ask, who are they connected to? Who am I connected to? And the final step is outreach and amplifying reach. So those are two separate things. We want to reach out to people, and then we want to create a process that amplifies. Because in my work, if I were to just do everything I did one-to-one, like reach out to one person, start over, reach out to a person, start over, I would be at this for 40 hours a week just doing that. And guess what? I have an actual job that I have to do, that I have to be justified in order to be paid for. So another hack, and this is how this whole thing becomes one full circle, is that we want to amplify that. So my best tip here is that whenever you meet someone, consider yourself as part of the media. And the reason I say this is because right now I work in marketing. And when I started for 97th Floor, is anyone familiar with 97th Floor? Hey, yay. We're a digital marketing agency in Lehigh. And when they recruited me to 97th Floor, I don't have a digital marketing background. And in fact, I told them no probably 5 times because I was like, you're crazy for wanting to hire me, and I don't want to work with crazy. Well, I kind of do, but I don't, I wondered about how they were running their business. And they're like, don't worry, you understand strategy, you understand communication, we'll teach you everything else. And we'll give you several months of training before we hand you a team and all of these clients, those clients that Colton mentioned, no. About a week in, they said, can you be ready next week? And so they handed me a team, handed me the clients, and they're like, campaigns and results and go. And I did not have the proper training. So what I did is I went back into my tool bag and I used the skills that I had, which were these things. I knew how to connect with people. I knew how to run campaigns for mostly communication. And what did you know? It really worked. It changed the entire infrastructure of 97th Floor. This is how we now market. But what we tell our marketers is, you are not a marketer. Because again, who wants to be sold to? And that's what marketing is about. We're trying to sell something. But if I reach out to you and say, hey, I actually just want to spend 30 minutes talking about you, that is what I would do when I was a member of the media. and I was a broadcast journalist. So keep this in mind. When you're going out, you may think, well, I'm just a student. Why would I actually have a reason to talk to these people? You do, because you're interested. And that is the best reason ever. If you appeal to someone's vanity, they're willing to talk to you for hours at length. So what I would do, going to our example of podcasting, is first, this is my intro. You can change this up, but I would say I'm doing an article, a podcast. Maybe your case, you're doing just an interview. You're just trying to interview people that you find inspiring. I'm doing a series on this topic. Would you be interested in being an expert guest? There's so many ways that you could reach out to people, but this is the general sense, is that you want to interview them. And you're coming up with a reason to talk to them. So you kind of have to have something of form for you. And every first conversation started like that, and by the time I would publish a podcast, I'd have several touch points with them. But my last conversation is the most powerful, and this is how everything comes together. The last conversation would be, thank you for being an awesome expert. I'm looking for 2 to 3 more people to support this series. Who do you highly recommend? And I would never leave it at that. I would always ask for the introduction. So with every interview that I did, I would get 2 to 3 more people, and I would get a personal introduction from the person I just interviewed. So my effort went from 1 to 1, I 10x that. And that is how I was able to eventually connect with Tim Ferriss. Because eventually you're gonna meet someone who has a contact that is 10 steps beyond what you could have ever hoped for. And because they just had a really good experience with you talking about themselves, they want to hand that off to the next person. Does that make sense? Okay. So, routine for this. To this day, I work on this 10 to 15 minutes a day. I created my spreadsheet a long time ago, and I still work at it. I do a power search around something. I make notes of things that I want to power search the following day. I drop everything into a spreadsheet. I create a compelling reason to connect with people that I respect and admire. So I will do this for personal reasons too. I don't just do this for my job. And sometimes those overlap. So last year, towards the end of the year, we were planning an event. It took place in January, and it was actually called Mastermind. And yeah, it was a really, really cool event. And in the course of planning for that, I was meeting with hotels where we could have this event. And one hotel that I visited was called Montage, Deer Valley. It's a 5-star resort. It's beautiful. I had visited Montage, Stein Eriksen, St. Regis, Waldorf, all amazing hotels. But Montage was here in terms of how they made me feel, how every single touch point was just amazing. So we ultimately ended up having an event there, but I followed up with, my point of contact was just someone in sales and said, how do you do this thing? Like, how do you actually tactically execute on creating delightful experiences for people? Because it's a really great idea, but to actually do it at every touch point, from the lobby ambassador to the people folding the towels to people running the sports shop, like, how are you doing this? And she said, oh yeah, we have a training program. And I'm like, can I learn more about that? And she put me in touch with the person who was in-house who runs the training program. And I just kept talking with him, and eventually that person, she put me in touch with the person who oversees the training program for all the montages throughout the entire world. And I'm like, I really want to know about this, and what I'm learning, I want to share with my colleagues, because I think this is super valuable for any business. And it wasn't part of my job description to do this, but this was something that I told my CEO. I'm like, I want to do an event very similar to something like this, where I bring in experts and we just have a panel. It's super easy to organize. We'll bring in some really good food, and we'll invite these people in, and we'll just ask questions. And I reached out to my sales contact, and then I already had touch point with the person overseeing the one in Deer Valley, and then I asked if the person who oversees all the training for all montages, if she'd be willing to fly in. knowing that she could just say no, I still had 2 people. From that, I had also started to work other contacts, and I found someone from the Utah Jazz, because if anyone's participated in like their Toyota Club, it's a really cool experience. So I found someone from the Utah Jazz, and it just so happened before he was at the Utah Jazz creating that experience, he was at Disneyland creating that experience. So we brought him in. We had a really fun night. I connected with people I otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to connect with. It had nothing to do with, had a little bit to do, but it had really nothing to do with my job description. Other than I was really curious about this thing. So I just orchestrated a reason to have these conversations and then to have these touch points with them. Do you think that you could do the same thing? You have all of these people who are interested in learning things. It doesn't even have to be specific to education, right? You're all wanting to glean hard skills and soft skills. And what better way to do that than to actually find the people doing it really, really well at this level? And her name was Dira, who oversees all in Montage. And I'm like, I know that you're crazy busy. I know that your schedule is packed. Can you do it this week? And she's like, let me move some things around, and because she loves talking about this stuff. Obviously, it's her passion. So it was just a well-organized, it was just like a complete imaginated idea that I had, and it all came together using this same blueprint. So connect with them in a way that compels further action. And in this, I can give you a couple skills to develop in order to do this last thing. Skills being listening. If you think you're a really good listener, you're probably not as good as you think. Most people listen in order to respond. Because when you're talking with someone, think about if you're being interviewed, if you're talking to someone that you respect and admire, while they're talking, part of your brain is internalizing the words, hopefully. The other part of your brain is thinking, what am I going to say next that's going to be really impressive? Or what question am I going to ask next that's really going to impress them? Anyone never do that? It's literally how we operate. So if you listen to truly hear, that's all you have to do. I study communication. I've studied it for most of my life. I find it fascinating. I find people and how we interact really, really interesting. And I've made a study of the human brain and this art of communicating. And what I know for certainty, this works 100% of the time. This works specifically for men as a woman. I was raised with 5 brothers. And so if I ever want my brothers to start having a conversation with me and keep talking, I know one thing. I ask them one question, and what men do is you pause for a really long time after a question's asked. And what women do is we think, they didn't understand the question. I'm gonna ask them a follow-up question to clarify. And what you've done is you've reset for that man. They start I have to rethink everything. So you start from the beginning, and everything gets muddled, and eventually they get frustrated. 9 times out of 10, this is what happened with my brothers. Men, is this wrong? Anyway. But what I did find is if I waited it out, and it might be really uncomfortable at first, I don't find it uncomfortable anymore, what they start telling you is truly, they go into the think tank and they start digging deep. And you let them talk, any human being. And when they get done, or what you think they're done, you wait. And again, there's that pause that's really only a couple of seconds, but you think, oh my gosh, I'm dying. Silence, it's scary. It's not. And what they'll do is dig a little bit deeper, and what comes up is actually what they meant to say. And as a journalist, this was how I did my entire job. I had to get really good at finding people fast, which was step 1. But when it came down to actually connecting with them, I was always on a deadline. So I really needed to get the story and the soundbite like really fast. My deadline was always like already happened. But what I didn't want is like a surface level story. I wanted the real story. I wanted people to, and I don't have time to like ask them about their cat or their grandma or any of their hobbies. So I usually had 1 or 2 questions, and then I would just wait it out. I would give them the time to answer the question and then really answer the question. And 9 times out of 10, I would hear, I've never told anyone that before. So yes, I collect secrets. This happens if you're standing in the grocery store. You could ask someone a question and you were there. You were present with them and you just wait it out. And they always feel really good coming out of that. In that micro moment, you have connected with them because you were present and you truly listened to them in ways that nobody listens anymore. Do this in interviews, do this with your friends and your family, and you are going to be set apart immediately because no one does this. So that is a skill to develop. The next skill is asking good questions, and this is kind of in parallel with listening, but I'll give you an example of what people do. They try to impress, like I'm going to ask a question that's really impressive, but author Stephen King, he writes a lot. He goes to conferences, he speaks, and says, I'm always asked the same question. Where do you get your good ideas? He said, that's a really bad question. He said, a really good question is, where do you get your bad ideas? Because we all have a plethora of bad ideas. You have to have so many bad ideas that a good idea eventually surfaces. You don't just have a series of good ideas. So that is a good question. That is truly connecting with someone. So go into it with the idea of not trying to be creative and ask the question no one's asked, but truly understanding, why am I asking this question? So whenever I write down a question, I ask, why am I asking this? And then I repeat that 3 times. Why am I asking this? Okay, why am I asking this? And eventually I get to the heart of what I'm truly trying to ask, and that's what I serve up. The last thing is being interested versus being interesting. This works well in the dating game too. If you're on a first date and you're thinking, I really want to impress this person, be really invested in them. Let them talk at length about themselves and be present with that. They're going to walk away thinking you're so interesting, even if you didn't say a word the whole night. So it's the idea that you're not there to self-promote, because honestly, that's not going to connect with anyone, and that's not going to keep you top of mind when they walk away. If they felt like they were able to truly engage with you, as in talk about themselves, because we all love that. Because ultimately, what you're offering up to them is what we all want, and that's validation. No one here, maybe if you have ascended to a level of like Buddha, you don't care about validation, but otherwise we're all human and we all want to be noticed and validated for who we are. Not who we're gonna be, not who we were, but who we are right now. So be really interested, and that goes back to you're listening. You're not worrying about being interesting because you're listening. You're not worrying about asking the best question because you're interested in what they're saying. Make sense? Okay. A little bonus, and then we'll get into any questions that you have. So, bonus, when I was talking about the events panels and summits and trying to find speakers and thought leaders that way, your new best friends, and this comes to key individuals within companies that you want to work for, is the gatekeepers. Get really good at connecting with administrative assistants, because that CEO does not own his schedule. Who do you think owns his schedule? Who is the person who is willing to put you on the schedule and take you off? It's not the CEO. In fact, if you are talking to a CEO at an event, he's going to say, yeah, get in touch with my assistant. So truly, get in touch with the assistant. Get really good at talking to people who are, their job is to enforce the parameter. Webmasters, moderators, event coordinators. So event coordinators usually have to have, I just did an event, you have touch points with all of your thought leaders, all of your speakers, all your attendees at least a dozen times before the actual event. So usually you can, if you like what you're hearing, be like, yeah, I'll connect you by email. I'm not going to give you their cell number, anything like that, but I will connect you by email. And the Benjamin Franklin effect. When I shared this blueprint with my mentees, the thing that came up for them was I always feel awkward asking for anything because I don't feel like I can offer anything. I feel like I'm taking something and I don't really have anything to offer. But I will tell you that the Benjamin Franklin effect is really powerful, and it's a psychological effect. A person who's already performed a favor for you is more likely to do another favor. So that's why with the podcast series, when I asked them to be an expert guest, when I followed up and said, will you introduce me to someone, they were already compelled to introduce me to someone. It was very rare that they said, yeah, I'll get back to you, and that was just a non-answer. But more often than not, they were like, yeah, I know someone. I'll introduce you right now. Because also, the request was a micro-action. So it's something they could put on their to-do list and immediately cross out. Anyone do that? Something you've already done, you still go back and like retroactively put on your to-do list just so you can cross it out? Not just me. Because it was specific and it was easy. So it made them feel really, really good. So that's what I have for you. So I don't know how much time we have, but questions? Q&A. Okay. Hi.
Just out of curiosity, how long did it take you to come up with this blueprint?
Pretty fast, because I was pretty motivated. I'm an introvert. I didn't actually want to talk to people without having a reason to connect with them. So I would say that by the time I graduated college, I mean, it took me all of 6 months, but I was already interviewing for jobs. I was hired before I was graduated. So I would say the first iteration of it was done within college, but everything that followed, like coming up with really good reasons to talk to people, was the next like 3 or 4 years in the working world. Yeah. What else? Did I see another hand?
How long did it take you to feel comfortable with it? Because it can be kind of awkward, like starting those conversations.
Yeah.
How long was it before you like felt really comfortable?
So I have a rule, and that is to assume familiarity, no matter what. That's the other thing I hate about networking is that you have this awkward, hi, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? What was that? I can't hear you. What do you do? I just go in and I'm like, hi, you look interesting. Tell me about yourself. I talk to everyone like they're my friend. Because again, I think it might be the introversion that I'm like, I hate the awkward stuff. It drains me. So let's just bypass it. What rule says that we have to be like talking to strangers? Like, why can't we just approach everyone that way? And they'll get on board because they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. You just broke the ice for me. So assume familiarity. And I did that right away. And I definitely, there's still awkward conversations. But those are good stories to tell later. Yeah, good question. What else?
You mentioned a lot of points of contact when you're trying to network with someone. I think a large majority of that might be through social media or something like that. I'm wondering what you could tell us with like LinkedIn and how we can avoid some barriers that might come with that.
Like how you reach people on LinkedIn? Like sending them messages? I would avoid that. Because it's the same thing why I created this blueprint for like trying to find positions. If I went about it the traditional way, I am just a resume in a stack of resumes. So if you reach out by social media, especially LinkedIn, how many messages do you get on LinkedIn?
I get a ton.
Yeah. So imagine a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or an HR manager within that on LinkedIn. They're going to get a ton. Just bypass that. You can definitely get some information about them, like their contact list on LinkedIn, and data mine that, but I would look for a phone number. I would look for an email, but better yet, a phone number. And that's where you start reverse engineering, you start connecting the dots, but I don't use social media to make contact with people, very rarely, unless I already have a really compelling reason to reach out to them and maybe someone I can name drop. Otherwise, I look for a way to get an introduction. And that's usually by email or phone. Yeah, good question. What else?
So, remember when you talked about, like, in college, you had blueprint basically already created? How did you become and stay so motivated throughout all these years? Like, keep going and going and going and not quitting?
Yeah. So a famous person, I don't know their name, they said motivation is like showering. It only lasts so long. So motivation for me is something that I have to continually, almost on a daily basis, just keep generating. And that comes from my daily tasks. I have a 7-point system. Every single day I check off things that I need to do in order to tally what 7 points in my mind is. And I keep doing that. A lot of CEOs say that, yeah, we have a system for growth and it's called doing things. And that's it. And I take that to heart because left to my own devices, I would rather not be doing things. I would rather be watching YouTube videos about cats and eating bonbons, truthfully. And I don't consider myself overly disciplined. I don't consider my process to be particularly clean. It's quite messy, but I always know on a given day, in order to keep moving and keep doing things, I have a check system. So create that for yourself. And it might just be every day I'm going to look for 2 new contacts to add to my spreadsheet, and I'm going to make contact with 1 person. You can start there. Motivation, it comes and goes. I mean, obviously when I was leading up to like that event where I brought in the experts, I was super motivated. I had an end game in mind, and it was happening within a couple weeks. When I did an event, I mean, we only had so many months that we had to put everything together. So motivation was plenty. But day-to-day life, I think most people think when you find your job of choice that you are just full to the brim of motivation. Every day is a delight. It's not. Every day is work. It's gritty. But you kind of have to accept, like, oh, this is work. Keep doing it. Keep doing the thing. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, you said that it's important to show interest in people when you're talking to them, right? But what's a good balance? I mean, do you still want to share stuff about yourself, or do you just show interest in them the whole time? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So one thing I shared with the girls I was mentoring is find out your fascination point. There's this really cool test. It's called the Fascination Report. And if you just type in how to fascinate into a browser, it will come up. It's by Sally Hogshead. And you can take a test, and there's a part of it that is a free test. And you can find out how you naturally fascinate people. For me, it's mystique. The less I share, the more people are fascinated by me. And so they naturally start to ask me questions about myself. I think that's one thing. But also, if you start asking people a lot about themselves, at some point they're going to be like, I need to know more about you because I suddenly find you very interesting. So it all works itself out. Like, you don't have to worry about coming in with an agenda. In fact, please don't. Any hiring manager, they can see that a mile away. You can definitely have like points of things that you know that you want to hit on, but those are probably already in your resume, right? Or in your portfolio of some sort. But otherwise, I would go in with the idea like, I just need to connect with them. I just want to connect with them. Actually, not need. I want to. I want to find out as much as possible. Because if they are having a bad day, you cannot do enough. You cannot share enough about yourself for them to be interested in you. And you cannot affect if they had a bad day. That's why when you're doing this, you're doing it continually. I still get people that are, not crazy about talking to me, but I always know next. Keep moving. Does that answer your question? Okay.
How could you incorporate that into like a job interview where they're like asking you a whole bunch of questions? How could you like really connect with them and like separate yourself from them?
A lot of questions that they ask are really templated, right? They're asking everyone. They actually don't really care what you respond with. So I would reset the conversation. I would reset that feedback loop, and I would ask them a follow-up question. Like, I want to understand more. Like, what are you actually asking me? That's almost always my go-to. If someone's bombarding me with questions that I'm like, I don't think you actually care what I'm going to say. You're just getting through a checklist. Let's actually ask, like, what are you asking about? Are you asking if I'm right for this job? What does that mean to you? And I will tell you straight up, like, oh, actually what you just explained, I'm not. I'm not a good fit. My first job was for International Sports Broadcasting. They're the host broadcasters for the Olympics. And they did these mass interviews. And I walked in and I had not graduated yet. And it was obvious from my resume. And in fact, they were only hiring professionals who had graduated and had several years of experience. And I thought, why not? Like, why not try this? So the first question they asked was like, why are you here? Like, what were you thinking? And so I proceeded to tell them why they needed me in particular, because they already were hiring hundreds of people with lots of experience and really set ways how they do things. So every question that they asked, they already knew the answer. But for me, they didn't know what the answer was going to be. And that is the value that I could provide. Also, that I was clearly comfortable with being uncomfortable by putting myself in that position. So just flip it, flip the script, reset everything. Okay, one more. Scared everyone away. One really good question, no pressure. Anyone over here?
I'm just curious, as failure-wise, what would be your advice for people as they get to like points of failure? I'm sure there's times in your life where you were like, well, God, this isn't even worth it. I mean, it's harder. Like, how do you overcome that? How do you keep going? How do you keep, I guess, how do you keep saying, okay, this is what I'm going for, this is what I'm going to do? Because what do you do when you reach those points of failure or you feel like you failed?
Yeah. One, fail fast. What that means is, when I moved to, I was asked to move to Israel for a company and open up a market there. And if you guys are familiar with anything Israel, heard any of the news, it's a very volatile market. And I was out of my element, so I just thought, I don't know how to succeed, so I'm just going to fail really fast. But we have this thing, and it's part of just our human DNA, where we're afraid of failure. None of us are not afraid of it. To this day, I've failed, and I'm still afraid of it. But what I do is I embrace the idea that it is part of any equation. So I can embrace that and just keep moving forward. Seth Godin writes a ton about fear and failure. So I would definitely recommend any of his books. Linchpin, his most recent book is What to Do When It's Your Turn, and It's Always Your Turn. Just Purple Cow. He talks a ton about failure and fear, and the idea that no matter what, it's always part of it. So you can either opt out and not do anything, and then you bypass failure altogether, or you can determine that fear and failure is part of everything, and I'm going to go for it anyway. And I will tell you, Tim Ferriss talks about this, is fear and failure is my compass. If I'm afraid of something or I feel like I'm going to fail at it, that's what I run at. And that's why I've been able to do as much as I've been able to do in my career and have the successes that everyone sees. I have at least, not even 10, like 100 failures that no one ever sees. And that's the crazy part about failure, is that no one actually pays attention. No one actually cares, because eventually you get to the success, which is just part of the equation. You have to have so many failures or so many bad ideas before you have a good idea. And that's what people remember. So does that answer your question?
I'm taking notes as you say. Good thinking.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.